Hi, and hello to the latest episode of Spotlight on Security Tech Insights. My name is Shelly Calhoun-Jones, and I'm a technical marketing director here at Cohesity. Today, we're joined by Jonathan Bell. Jonathan, would you like to do an introduction?
Yeah, sure. My name is Jonathan Bell. I'm a director of technical solutions at Cohesity. What does that mean? In a lot of cases, it's other duties as assigned, but I primarily work on AI solutions and integrations. So not only the tools that are out there in the world, but then how Cohesity integrates with them and works with them.
Jonathan, it is great to have you, and I'm real excited about the topic for today's episode. We're going to take a look at how AI agents and advanced models help improve workflows and automate business tasks. The idea is that these technologies allow organizations to gain insight and solve problems before they arise. And in the industry, we've seen significant progress with companies like OpenAI and Microsoft providing customizable tools for businesses and individuals. In particular, we've seen advancements with models, with improved reasoning, coding, scientific tasks, everything from China's DeepSeek to open source projects like Google's Gemma. The idea is that regulatory bodies and businesses are working to keep up, understanding that these technologies need innovation, governance, and change. Jonathan, what are some trends that you've seen in the AI and LLM space?
Yeah, it's been a little wild recently. Even in the time since we started planning this episode, the landscape has changed. So looking back historically, you had some of the big players out there jumping in, like OpenAI and bringing out ChatGPT. And then Anthropic with Claude was, running neck and neck with them for a while. And then after a while, more players started getting into the market. So you started to see Meta jump in with both feet and bring the Llama models to market. And while all this was going on, Microsoft has been kind of keenly eyeing everything and figuring out where they fit in. And, they partnered with OpenAI to bring their language models into Microsoft tools. But then we also saw an explosion out of China with DeepSeek. DeepSeek got everyone's attention. And the reason DeepSeek got everyone's attention was supposedly they should not have been able to build this model because, the industry's understanding was that they didn't have enough GPUs to be able to make these leaps forward. However, like most people do, when you start having limited resources, you start to develop different and better ways to use those resources. So with DeepSeek, we've got all kinds of interesting papers they published where they talk about how they're actually more efficiently using the GPUs on the back end to get the work done. They understand how the busing and the caching works on the GPU to a point where they don't have to shuttle data around as much. And then they also were leaning on using things like what's called the mixture experts. So whenever a problem comes into the LLM, it breaks it down into smaller problems that expert LLMs pick up. And this allows you to get more done with less hardware. And it's also something that we're seeing the other major players in the field start to emulate now. So since all of that hype has kind of blown up and people got all excited about DeepSeek, within the last couple weeks here, Meta also with Llama released Llama 4.0 to some of their models, and that's using a mixture of experts now too. So if you really want to see things go by fast, just start reading some of the articles that come across the newsfeed and start subscribing to some of the articles in the AI space, because just when you think you're caught up, somebody comes out with something new, or somebody starts doing something different, or they start connecting the different data sources. And it's a really exciting time to be in technology right now.
That's incredible. It reminds me of, the analog version. You would have someone in a room. You might pick up the phone to research something. You might go down to your public library to pick up a book, but now you have a room full of experts that you can tap for knowledge. So really interesting to kind of see where we're going, like you mentioned, with just technology in general. So really exciting. Now, with the customers that you've worked with, or just, general projects that you've worked on, What are the common use cases that you're seeing AI being used for, and how do you think it's going to evolve over the next couple of years?
Yeah, what's really interesting to me is seeing the use cases kind of evolve real time. Originally, when you start talking about AI and where it came from, you start looking at some of the machine learning models and things like that. So initially, machine learning was typically a data science and data processing type model, right? If you were doing what I would call classic AI ML, you were setting patterns that you would want to look for in data and then unleashing the ML on a giant data set to go find these different patterns. And then the AI was translating some of this to make sense to make it human consumable.
Mm-hmm.
Then when the large language models came in, AI really kind of took off in another direction. It became this conversational interface where you could get to the point where it seemed like you were talking to a real person on the other side of that prompt, right? Recently, multiple models have actually passed the Turing test. So with the Turing test, you're trying to convince someone who's interacting with an AI that they are interacting with a person. So when they believe that they are not interacting with a computer anymore and think they're interacting with a person, that's when you pass a Turing test.
Yeah.
And so this is essentially already happening. Now that is happening, what we're starting to see is, great, we've got the LLMs, we've got these big frontier models, and people originally thought, oh, well, what would be great is I can have it do X or I can have it do Y, and it'd be really great at that because of what it is good at. So you started seeing things like legal and healthcare use cases where it was go dive through this treasure trove of documents, find specific things I'm looking for, and then help me understand the details, right?
Yeah.
However, that has started to evolve now too, where the LLMs and the implementation of the LLMs has gotten so good, it has come down to what I'll call a pick a use case type model. So at the end of the day, we're trying to get these tools into people's hands to do their jobs better.
Yeah.
So if you're an accountant, you want to be better at accounting tasks. You want to be better at tracking things that are in the books. You want to be better at finding different cases of fraud or fraudulent transactions, right?
Yeah.
If you're in healthcare, you may be wanting to go look through historical data to try and find patterns, or maybe you're trying to dig through a bunch of research to connect the dots between different treatments that maybe have never been done before. And then you'll have what I'll call the more mundane type stuff. Write me an email, right? Here's a bunch of information, summarize it for me. Or even now you see it in a lot of the meeting tools. So if you have a platform that you use to do web meetings online, it's starting to collect the transcripts and summarize for you. Or if you join the meeting late and it's been recording, you can click a little button and say, catch me up on what this meeting's been about. And it'll give you a summary.
That's super
Right?
handy when you're triple booked.
Right. It's crazy. And so what we're really seeing now is this explosion of AI tools from being what I would say limited to a few interesting use cases to what we consider now helping people who are experts at something or who are quite good at their job adapt and be able to work more efficiently and work better at it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really great way to break it down. I love the idea of having a knowledge base of information, but you have a research assistant that's helping you gather the data if you're actually going in to troubleshoot something. There's so many different practical applications to it. I'm working right now on renewing a couple cloud certifications, and I've been doing a lot of research online, and sometimes I'll just ask my personal research assistant, what have you heard about this particular service over the last 6 months? So there's so many different practical applications. It's a real amazing time that we're in
And
right
what's
now.
interesting about it too, it's not magic, right?
Yeah.
So it's based off of, in many cases, and especially when we talk about integrating it into enterprise organizations, like it's based off of information you already had access to,
Right.
but just wouldn't be able to process otherwise, right? It's really helping bring the best out of you to apply it to whatever situation you've gotten yourself into, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point there. For most organizations, your data is distributed across different environments. You may have a couple hundred cloud accounts with different vendors that you work with. You may be still working on-prem, or maybe you just recently acquired an organization, and so you have all this data. It's a great way to tap into it. So that's real exciting. Now, you mentioned earlier AI agents? We were talking a bit about AI agents and some of the innovations that we've seen within that space. How would you integrate and build an agent? And what are some of the challenges that organizations run into when implementing them within their enterprise applications?
Yeah, so we've come to a really curious time where you've got your AI models now, and then every time you turn around, somebody's talking about building an agent, having an agent for something, or also hearing the term agentic or agentic workflows, right?
Yeah.
So an agent is a specialized model that has access to data or information that is going to assist you to help you get a specific task done, right? One of the best ways to look at it is think about some of the things we've had in life for regular agents, like a travel agent, right? If I want to book a trip to, let's say, Fiji, it sounds wonderful. Let's go to Fiji. If I want to book a trip to Fiji and I'm on my own, there's quite a few things I have to look at. First off is the travel. How am I going to get there? How long is it going to take? What are my layovers like? When I get there, where am I going to stay? Is there a resort? Is there some sort of accommodation that I would like? Am I an eco-tourist? Do I want to go stay in a hut in the jungle? Right. And then on top of that, you also have to think about how do I get into the country from a like passport control perspective? Do I need a visa? Like, do I have to do paperwork ahead of time? If I was looking to do this on my own, it may take me a long time to figure some of this stuff out. Maybe multiple searches, going to different pieces of information to bounce around to get what I need to start planning my trip. Where if I call a travel agent, they already know what they can do. They can have all the information to the flights and how long it's going to take, and they have information about what it's going to take to actually get me into the country, etc. Well, now think of an AI doing that job, right? So an AI agent, you would give a specialty. I could do an AI travel agent, and guess what? It would have access to the resources that someone like a travel agent would have to help me look up the flight information, look up how long it's going to take, look up my layovers. It can go to the government websites and see what forms or processes are required to get me in the country, right? So I can make this agent that does that. And then the idea of being agentic layers on top of that, in that I would interact with a top level model and say, I would like to travel to Fiji and help me out. And it may ask me some questions to get the information it needs, like when would you like to go, right? How long would you like to stay? Will you be doing this for pleasure or for work, right? And then the agentic piece of that is it would take my inputs and spread it out to different task workers who in reality are different agents specialized at different tasks. And it would send them off to do their work autonomously and automatically, and then report back to me their results and get me to either approve it and say, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for, or deny it and kind of hone it a little bit and say, no, that's not what I was looking for. You got this right. You got that wrong. Can you do maybe this a little bit differently? So with the agents, we're typically talking about taking specialized work with specialized information and giving it what it needs to be able to reply and do that job. And then when we start getting broader and talk about things being agentic, you start talking about how can we do that autonomously? How can we get those different disparate agents to talk to each other and communicate so that the travel agent is communicating with the scheduling agent to know that this is when it's a good time for me to travel or not. And that's when we start getting into the agentic space and agentic workflows.
Ah, fascinating. It's almost like having a department of agents just at your disposal
Right. And
on the back end, of course.
And so one way I talk to people about this is like, we're not creating new problems to solve. It's just a little bit of a different way of going about things. So if I previously had a department and I had a really nicely well organized department that understood everyone's roles and responsibilities, these folks in this department could have an agent who could help them out, right?
Yeah.
And you could build agents essentially based off the framework that you use for people, right? Well,
Right.
this person will have to run and get this data, and they'll have to tell these two other folks and their boss, etc. But the other thing is the problems that you have to solve to do this well are not new problems.
Right.
So your data and your access to data and who has access to that data, what's in that data, what comprises our different data sets, all those problems that we've been looking to solve in what I'll call traditional IT for quite a while, still need to be solved with AI and agentic workflows.
That's a great point there, Jonathan. I mean, are there initiatives in place where we're trying to figure out ways to harden or secure these tools to make sure that we keep the bad guys out, but we still have the ability to allow that data to be available to the right people?
Yeah, and some of it is as boring as it may sound, your traditional security posture,
Interesting.
right? Do I have access to that document? No. Why don't I have access to that document? Well, it has confidential company data in there that we don't trust you with. Okay, so should I have access to an AI who has access to that document? I have a feeling the answer is no, right? Because
Right.
if the AI can consume what's in that document and I have access to the AI, well, I can start asking the AI questions about what's in there and it'll start giving me answers, right?
Exactly. So making sure that you have role-based access controls, that you have the right IAM policies in place, maybe considering using like a DSPM or DLP type of solution where you can go out and do data discovery to determine like how sensitive this data is.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's also interesting too is when you start having conversations with folks in the real world who are running a business or trying to run an IT department, and you start showing them the cool answers that the models can give you. One of the first questions they're going to ask is, how do we make sure it doesn't have access to proprietary and confidential things and it doesn't start sharing that with people? Or how do we make sure that data doesn't get pulled in and start getting used by training for the models, right?
Right. No, that's a really good point there. They're really determining whether or not you want to use this data for training or if it's something that you want to keep isolated or hardened down to keep the right users, give the right access to the right users, as it were.
Yep.
Well, I know that Cohesity has been doing a lot of innovations within the space with Cohesity Gaia, which is a great tool for learning more about the data within your organization. And we do have a number of resources out on Cohesity, but from a general from a general AI perspective, how does Cohesity Gaia work within this ecosystem, and how does it help improve data search and analysis capabilities?
Yeah, if you look back at let's say NVIDIA GTC this past year, one of the big themes that is reoccurring in this space, and you'll even see it in some of the clickbaity news articles or even the legitimate news spaces where it's become a much bigger topic of conversation, and it's around what data do these models have access to, right? And then in some cases, is it trademarked, copyrighted, otherwise IP protected, right? Or should we be training on that in the first place? But then also, how do you access all this data? How do you shuttle it around? Are you going to take your petabytes of enterprise data and make another copy and send it to a cloud provider to then have a model run against, right? And where Cohesity is really kind of uniquely positioned in this space is our ability to turn your secondary data or your backup data or your file data into a data lake that you can then apply the AI stack against. Due to our file system, you get that copy of data for air quotes free, right? We instantiate a snapshot. It doesn't take up any extra space. It's available almost immediately, right? So we're uniquely positioned in that we're able to take these copies of the data, spin them up without having to make another copy, and then apply the learning to it, right? And then once we have essentially the data processed into a format that it can be used by the large language model, we can then layer the security tools on top of it, such as your RBAC to make sure that the right people in the right departments have access to that data and other people don't. And then the access to it, right? So being able to have things like MFA in place to make sure you have multiple factors of authentication before you get to the LLM prompt. Because what happens if I'm unauthorized, yet I somehow get access to your LLM? I can actually start asking the LLM questions and compiling all the results until essentially I've stolen your data.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
So it's a bit of a wild space, but Cohesity is, like I said, kind of uniquely, we're in a unique position here because we already have essentially a data lake of all of your enterprise data. We can make a copy of it very quickly without taking up extra space. And then we can apply the AI processing on top of it to make sure that you're bringing that data in a responsible way. You're not building out an entire separate AI infrastructure to bring this data in, land it, massage it, process it, etc. And then once we have it processed, being able to securely access it in a way that makes sense within current enterprise frameworks.
No, that's great. The time factor, I used to work in cloud, and you're absolutely right. Migrating data like that, especially when it goes into the petabytes, it could take weeks, if not months. So having the ability to use your data in place is huge. And then also the security factors as well. So that's great.
And in many cases, you're backing up that data already. So why don't you put it to work instead of just letting it sit there?
Exactly. Why not use it?
Yeah.
Well, I know that we have a new integration that's coming out with Cohesity Gaia and Microsoft Copilot. Do you want to share any updates that we have on that front?
Yeah. So we are certified with Microsoft now. Our plugin is available in the Power Platform catalog. So what does that mean? So Microsoft, as we talked a little bit about earlier, they work very closely with OpenAI. They've invested in OpenAI, and as a result, they use the OpenAI models in Copilot. And what that allows them to do is to configure what's called actions on their platform. And what an action does is it allows you to build a specialized agent that can go take action. So the action is, it could be a variety of things. It could go out to a data source and pull data, or in our case, it connects to Cohesity Gaia. And the reason why this is important and why this changes the paradigm a little bit is rather than taking an Azure OpenAI model and just pointing it at my data and then having to go through like all that processing and making different copies, et cetera, like we talked about earlier, we do the data processing using Cohesity Gaia, and now we can use Copilot to act as like a front-end interface. So Copilot becomes the chatty AI LLM that you have a conversation with. And then on the back end, it sends a text query over to Cohesity Gaia, and it will send it to only data sets that you have access to. So we use RBAC on the back end to make sure that you indeed have access to that data set. So it sends the query in, and it will only query data sets that you have access to. And then it responds with a text answer and citations. So rather than making another copy of the data, having to think about legal and security ramifications of sending it to an offsite processor of the data, Instead, it is working with vendors that you already trust and probably already have in your ecosystem. From the Cohesity point of view, we've taken your data, whether it's from your backups or whether it's from your Microsoft 365 data, or it's from NAS sources or unstructured data. We've applied the AI processing to it, so it's available in a secure fashion. And now these integrations just have to pass through the text query to the service, and then you get the text answer back with the citations like, this is the answer, but these are the 5 documents in your backend data set where I got it from.
Oh, that's great. And I know for a lot of us, we like using our own native tools. There's less of a learning curve there. So having the ability to do it directly in Copilot is great.
Yeah, and what's great about the Copilot Studio as well is it gives you the ability to publish into different channels. And so these channels would be, you could enable it in M365 Copilot. You can enable it in Teams. You can do things like build an endpoint and then integrate it directly into Slack. And so all of this is already built into the Copilot Studio for Microsoft. And it also gives you an extra security layer on top of that. So you have the data sets that you have access to in Cohesity Gaia that you can send queries in and get answers from that are all R-backed. And then additionally, you've got on the front end, you can say only publish this integration in certain channels. So I could do things like create an agent that's for my accounting department that is R-backed to accounting data in Cohesity. And then on the front end with Copilot, only the accounting department has permissions to access that accounting agent. So you can break down your different workloads and different use cases into different agents and then have multiple layers of security on top of it.
That's great. You could have like an IT knowledge base for your IT team, or security knowledge base for your security operations team. Just have specific data sets that they're pulling from. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely.
cool. Well, Jonathan, it's been wonderful chatting with you about AI and some of the innovations that we've seen within this space. I especially love, the idea that we not only have, one research assistant, we have a whole team of different tools that we can use at our disposal with some of the changes that we're seeing coming out within the space. So it's real exciting to see where we're going. And, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, things are changing rapidly. So it's good to stay informed and, keep abreast with what's happening out there. Before we wrap up today, were there any other things that you wanted to share with the audience?
Yeah, keep your eye on the model space. The models are constantly changing and evolving and beating other models and benchmarks, which makes those developers get jealous and work harder on their model. And so the models are constantly leapfrogging. So keep an eye there. And then also the agent orchestration space has really kind of exploded. So being able to keep track of all these different agents and how they communicate with each other, et cetera, is also a highly interesting and rapidly changing space to really keep an eye on as well.
Have you, just a side question, have you seen any good training courses or any sample projects that people can use to kind of get their hands on with the technology?
Yeah, honestly, especially with the Copilot space, within their learn.microsoft.com platform, they have quite a few really good get you started labs and learning and things like that. That could get anyone, I mean, it's so easy, I can do it. So it could get anyone diving in and creating agents within Copilot Studio super quick.
Sweet. No, I'm gonna check that out myself.
Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on the show today, and I do want to let folks know, if you want to go check out the new Gaia integration, that's available on the Power Platform. We also have some resources out on cohesity.com, so definitely check those out. And this wraps up another episode of Cohesity Spotlight on Security Tech Insights. Thanks for watching, everyone.